So we take a look at today's scriptures. Today's first reading comes from the Acts of the Apostles, which we remember is the Gospel of Luke, part 2. In the Gospel of Luke, part 2, we see how it is that he talks about how it is that Jesus was on earth for 40 days after he rose from the dead. Christ died, and then Christ rose from the dead. He was on earth for 40 days before he did what? Before he ascended into heaven. Today we celebrate the ascension of the Lord, the solemnity of the ascension. What is the ascension? That celebration of how it is that Jesus ascended into heaven. He died, he rose again, but rising again created a problem for us. It's fine, once you're dead, you're dead. Jesus died, but then he came back to life again. So now Luke, in the Acts of the Apostles, has that challenge of figuring out, okay, what happened to Jesus after he died and rose again? Was he still on earth? Luke's answer was no. What happened was Jesus rose again. He ascended into heaven. Jesus ascended into heaven, and so we have that story of how it is that Jesus told his disciples how it is that they would receive the Holy Spirit. And then after that it says, as they were looking on, he was lifted up, and a cloud took him from their sight. So it's like he stepped on a cloud and went on up. What are the physical problems that we have? There are two physical problems with the ascension. The ascension was a way that we explained what happened to Jesus after he rose from the dead. What are the two physical problems? If you studied science, did they teach us in science that we can walk on clouds? If you walk on a cloud, that would be interesting to know if you could walk on a cloud. A cloud is not something that you can walk on, so that creates an interesting thing. Also, where did Jesus go up to in the ascension? Joseph Campbell was a man who studied mythology, and he said, how interesting, even if Jesus went up from the earth at the speed of light, he would still be within the Milky Way. So it's interesting that we have a very different worldview in the 21st century from what they did in the ancient world. In the ancient world, they believed that he went up above the bowl of the sky. But Joseph Campbell said, how interesting, because even if Jesus ascended at the speed of light, he'd still be within the Milky Way. In the ancient world, they didn't know of the universe, the expansive universe that we know of. They just knew of this flat earth. That's what they believed in. Which had a bowl above it, the bowl of the stars, and above the bowl of the sky was the heavens. How interesting. That's today's first reading. Today's second reading talks about how it is that in the letter to the Ephesians, how it is that God might give us a new spirit of wisdom and open the eyes of our hearts. What a great image. It also talks about Christ being seated at the right hand of God in heaven, which is why we have this reading for the Ascension. And then in today's Gospel of Mark, finally we're back to the Gospel of Mark. Do you remember we're in the year of Mark? This is the year in which we read the Gospel of Mark, but we've taken a break from Mark during this whole season of Easter, and we've had the Gospel of John because John talks about Christ being lifted from the dead, what happens. Mark gives a different story about what it is that will happen to believers. Don't go out and go start to try to handle venomous serpents. Do you see some of the things that it says in here? It was part of the ancient way of saying that if Christ is with you and if we have the Spirit, then you'll be able to do extraordinary things. Don't go trying to pick up rattlesnakes because you believe that Jesus is with you and the rattlesnake won't bite you. God news, the rattlesnake is still a rattlesnake. Okay? But it talks in that reading about how it was that Christ was taken up into heaven, which was St. Mark's way of saying Christ died and Christ rose again. What happened after that? Christ was taken up into heaven, which is what we celebrate today in the solemnity of the Ascension.